Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to another episode review from Star Trek Discovery, this time for episode 4, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry. Man, what a title! So we start out the episode with this really cool inside the replicator effect. I guess we're kind of retconning that the replicators did exist during the time of TOS. I mean, it's generally been kind of accepted that they were food slots, but I'm okay with them being replicators as well. The computer provides Burnham with a new uniform, reminding her that she currently has no rank, which is, really helpful of the computer. It's another step on the path towards Burnham's redemption. It's cool to see her almost completely in a Starfleet uniform this time. Of course, she does not have a pin on her chest, which indicates her rank. Tilly comes in with a package for Burnham that recently arrived in the mail.
You were in the shower when the ping went off, and that's how I was fully clothed, so I thought, well, I'll save you a trip to the depot.
Tilly.
Yes, less extraneous words.
Fewer extraneous words. Sorry, it's a pet peeve. Package turns out to be the last will and testament for Captain Georgiou, which Burnham understandably does not want to open at the moment, so she stashes it under her bed. Presumably we'll get a look at it later in the episode. Burnham is called to the bridge. On her way, she of course gets some stares in the corridor. As she told Tilly a moment earlier, a new uniform does not give her a clean slate. She is still generally thought of in the fleet as the mutineer and the person who's responsible for the current war with the Klingons. We get another terrific scene between Burnham and Saru in the turbolift on the way to the bridge. Saru is of course shocked to see Burnham still aboard the ship, having assumed that she left on the prison transport. We also get an explanation for his little appendages that appear behind his ears. They are his threat ganglia, and they emerge when he is threatened or feels danger.
You can tell your threat ganglia to relax. I'm only here to help.
My ganglia remain unconvinced.
Burnham and Saru enter the bridge in the midst of a battle simulation. It does not, unfortunately, go well. Lorca is pretty hard on his crew, maybe not quite the best motivation, but in Lorca's mind he needs to get them battle ready as soon as possible. He is a commander who feels it's very important to be battle ready, especially given the ship's unique position as possibly the only ship that can be behind enemy lines. By the end of this scene, it feels like Commander Landry, the Chief of Security, is being pushed particularly hard. This will certainly come into play later in the episode. Lorca orders them to run the simulation again as he and Burnham leave the bridge. They enter Lorca's menagerie, and I have to say at this point I'm kind of surprised that Burnham finds himself in Lorca's inner circle so quickly. I didn't think she'd get to see this room this soon in the series. Burnham expresses surprise at all of the weaponry in the room, and Lorca tells her that he studies war, and this is where he hones his craft. He is certainly not your typical Starfleet captain. This is not a Kirk or a Picard or even a Sisko. Lorca is definitely in a class all of his own, and he is definitely not like any captain we've seen before. Lorca reveals to Burnham that he has captured the creature from the previous episode. And interestingly, from his dialogue, it seems that Lorca sees himself and the creature as the same, built for war and particularly suited to that end. That metaphor we will see will get turned on its head by the end of the episode. Burnham is tasked with weaponizing the creature, a task that she doesn't seem to be particularly excited about. Commander Landry and Burnham are assigned to work together to discover a way to weaponize the tardigrade creature, which is revealed as such in this episode. That was great. I turned out to be correct in the last video. And Commander Landry dubs the creature Ripper. Earlier I mentioned that I think that Lorca sees himself and the creature as being the same, but here I think we get a better picture of what the real metaphor is. Ripper and Burnham seem to be much the same.
You judge the creature by its appearance, and by one single incident from its past.
And as Commander Landry points out, the tardigrade and Burnham share another thing in common. They are both being used by Captain Lorca. Captain Lorca is contacted by Admiral Cornwell, who informs him that the planetoid Corvan II is under attack by Klingons. Corvan II is a major source of dilithium, supplying more than 40% of Starfleet's vessels, and also is an interesting continuity tie-in with Star Trek The Next Generation. Corvan II is mentioned in the TNG episode New Ground, where we learn these creatures hail from there. The Corvan Gilvos are reportedly going extinct due to industrial pollution. I guess mining's dirty work no matter what century it takes place in. Here's where my first major problem with this episode rears its ugly head. If Corvan II is so important to the Federation's war effort, why on earth is it being left so undefended? The Admiral says that the nearest starship is 86 hours away. This seems to me extremely short-sighted. Why isn't there at least one ship stationed there to protect the planet? Also, I love the old school UFP logo. That attention to detail is awesome. Captain Lorca promises the Admiral that the ship will be able to jump, and Lieutenant Stamets informs him that that is most definitely not the case. Interestingly, I have to say, we have a seemingly sane Admiral coupled with an off-balance captain. They really are turning a familiar Star Trek trope on its head. Since the last episode, Stamets has incorporated the technology recovered from the Glen into the Spore drive on Discovery, but something critical is missing. A supercomputer required to calculate the jump. What could it be? Discovery prepares for a Spore jump. Stamets is slightly less than optimistic about their chances, but Lorca gives the go order anyway. Plus, we get some indication for the reason for Discovery's split hull. It seems that the inner and outer parts of the hull spin while the Spore drive is active. Interestingly, I looked at this scene closely, and it isn't the entire ring that spins, it's merely the outer part of it. If you look closely, the windows do stay put. So my biggest concern about crew quarters and different positions on the ship changing all the time, that's not the case here. It looks like it's just part of the hull that spins and not the interior decks and rooms. Regardless of exactly how and why it works, Captain Lorca's fidget spinner looks ready to go.
And always twirling, twirling, twirling towards freedom.
During the jump, Burnham notes that Ripper is reacting, causing her to believe that there may be some connection between the tardigrade creature and the Spore drive. The jump is unsuccessful, and Discovery finds itself in the corona of a star. Captain Lorca gets an eyeful of the star, which can't be good for that injury he mentioned in the previous episode. Lieutenant Stamets is injured in the incident, which means we get a trip to Sickbay and an introduction to another character we haven't met yet, Dr. Hugh Culber, who reportedly is Lieutenant Stamets' boyfriend, or possibly future boyfriend, depending on how you interpret this scene. I really enjoy the interplay between these two, and I foresee some great dialogue. I love Stamets' wry sense of humor here.
Another millimeter and the palatine bone would have pierced his cortex.
The frontal lobe is overrated. It only contains memory and emotional expression. It's completely unnecessary.
Well, I'll save it. Just in case you might want to have a feeling one day.
We also learn in this scene that the entire ship was built around Lieutenant Stamets' tech, which does explain why it's such a unique vessel and acts the way it does. Lorca also name-drops some great inventors throughout history, including the Wright brothers, Zephram Cochrane, and, amusingly, Elon Musk. I guess maybe he does eventually get us to Mars. Captain Lorca plays the messages from Corvan II on a ship-wide channel. This has the effect of certainly motivating his troops in a very different way than we've seen a Starfleet captain be kind of manipulative before. However, his particular style of motivation has a definite effect on Commander Landry, who makes a fateful error here. She decides to anesthetize the creature, and without confirming that the creature is in fact unconscious, opens the force field, armed with a powerful phaser, which of course does not slow Ripper down, and amazingly, to my shock and surprise, Commander Landry is killed. I was not expecting this character to die this early on, and her death is definitely a shock. However, this is possibly the stupidest thing a Starfleet officer has done, certainly in this series, and that's saying something given the mutiny that we see in the first couple of episodes. This scene is one of my favorite scenes in this episode, and that's no surprise seeing as Saru plays a big part in it. Burnham uses Saru's threat response to determine that the tardigrade is not a predator, and in doing so uses false pretense to get Saru to come there under the pretense of apologizing for her actions aboard the Shenzhou. We like to think that, the mutiny aside, as a main character, Burnham is the good one who will be moral and above reproach going forward, but she still has that Vulcan logic thing going on too. She has a ways to go, showing that she will use people to her own ends if she thinks that it's logical. This scene also shows that Saru has definite reservations about Lorca and Discovery, especially with his parting line to Burnham here.
You have not changed an iota, Burnham. Your contrite words were insincere.
They were necessary.
I was wrong to question your place on the crew. You will fit in perfectly with Captain Lorca.
Interestingly enough, at the beginning of the scene, when Saru enters the room, it seems kind of clear that he has never seen it before and did not even know that this place existed. This is interesting that Burnham is in Lorca's inner circle with regards to his secrets more so than his first officer. I think we'll see this idea play out more as the series progresses. Burnham eventually discovers, through Ripper's reaction to the spores, that Ripper is the missing component in the drive system and acts as the supercomputer to help plot the course. This scene is quite beautiful, and I really like the reaction that Stamets has. It's the first time we see him not being kind of a passive-aggressive or just plain aggressive jerk. And he also gets the best lines. He might be starting to match Saru as far as good lines go.
My tricorder is detecting energy transfer. Some form of symbiosis. It is talking to them.
That hardly seems fair. I always wanted to converse with my mushrooms.
The crew of the Discovery attempts another spore drive jump, this time using the tardigrade in conjunction with their system. They beam Ripper into the containment unit, and the machine from the Glen automatically activates. It seems that these spore drive nipple clamps connect with the tardigrade and allow the ship to complete its jump successfully. However, the tardigrade seems to be in distress as it's being used to jump. Stamets is very impressed with the progress, but Burnham, noticing the distress of Ripper, is concerned for his safety. Discovery arrives successfully at Corvan II, destroying a number of Klingon birds of prey. As Stamets prepares the spore drive to jump again, Ripper's distress is increasingly clear. Discovery successfully jumps away, destroying the last of the Klingon ships and saving the colony. I'm assuming that because this is classified technology, they're not allowed to stick around, and the miners have no idea who it is who saved them. Following the use of Ripper in the spore drive, it seems that he and Burnham have lost their bond somewhat. Ripper no longer trusts her, and it seems that both he and Michael Burnham have been used by Captain Lorca. However, now Michael Burnham has the reputation of having helped save the colony from the Klingons, which is another step on the road to redemption. Quick note about this scene at the end of the episode: I would be more than happy if every episode ended with a wrap-up scene between Burnham and Cadet Tilly. I really love these two together, and I can't wait to see more of this relationship. Burnham accepts the last will and testament of Captain Philippa Georgiou, and man, is it ever great to see this character again, even though it's just in holographic form. I really, really love Michelle Yeoh. I thought her performance in the first two episodes was excellent, and this nice little surprise cameo at the end is very, very welcome. I love the note that she leaves on.
Take good care. But more importantly, take good care of those in your care.
This is a lesson that I think Burnham will be learning over the course of this season. We see the way she bonded with the tardigrade, and we'll soon learn that she has a responsibility to look after those who maybe don't have as much agency as she does in order to affect their lives. The Klingons, led by Vok, also feature heavily in this episode. They have a separate storyline, not currently connected to what's going on Discovery, but hopefully we will see these storylines merge in the future. It turns out that following the Battle of the Binary Stars, T'Kuvma's ship has been drifting for 6 months while the Klingons aboard, led by Vok, make repairs. In probably one of the more shocking revelations of this episode, we learn that the Klingons have eaten Captain Georgiou. While definitely shocking, this is not completely out of character with the Klingons. We learned in Deep Space Nine that they frequently eat the hearts of their enemies. This episode is the first to feature L'Rell heavily. This Klingon woman seems very interesting to me. I have a feeling that her character is going to be very important. She does definitely play a big part in this episode, and I think going forward she's going to be a big part of the Klingons of Discovery. In this scene, she manages to convince Vok to salvage the dilithium processor from the adrift USS Shenzhou. He's initially reticent to use Federation technology, seeing that as going directly against T'Kuvma's directive to remain Klingon. Cole of the House Core arrives, displaying unexpected humility towards Vok. This scene also confirms something that I suspected, that T'Kuvma was the only Klingon who had access to cloaking technology. The technology aboard his ship was an aberration, and it is not something that the wider Klingon Empire has access to. Vok and L'Rell board the Shenzhou to recover the dilithium processor, and interestingly enough, this scene between them seems to contain a lot of energy and sparks. I'm wondering if there's some sort of romantic relationship being set up between these two. I've never heard Klingon pillow talk before, but I think this might seriously qualify. Vok and L'Rell return to their ship with the dilithium processor, finding that Cole has supplied their crew with food and turned them to his side. It turns out that Cole is quite good at playing Game of Thrones, and Vok is duped. L'Rell seemingly turns on Vok in exchange for the food. I had a feeling watching this scene that she wasn't being entirely honest with Cole, but I'm still not entirely sure what to make of her. Cole tells L'Rell to kill Vok, but instead L'Rell suggests that they maroon him aboard the Shenzhou. The Klingon segment of this story ends with Vok being marooned on the Shenzhou, but L'Rell shows up at the last moment, claiming to have stolen a raider that they can use to go to House Mokai, a Klingon family that is run by matriarchs. Apparently, in order to succeed, Vok will have to give up everything. What that means, however, is not entirely clear. Hopefully we find out more about this story in the next episode. So there you have it. The Butcher's Knife cares not for the lamb's cry. All in all, I think a fairly good episode. I did not enjoy this one quite as much as I did last week's episode, but I think that's merely due to the fact that it didn't have that really great scene between Saru and Burnham that I loved in that last episode. In this episode, they did have that great scene towards the end, but it just didn't quite hit the notes that the other one did. There's some definite Star Trek touchstones in this episode. Of course, a lot of people online have been comparing this one to The Devil in the Dark. Very similar story with regards to the creature here. He is not what we think that he is, and is in fact a more docile, peaceful creature, not the predator that the captain and Commander Landry think that he is. Similarly, the Horda in The Devil in the Dark, of course, was merely just a mother protecting her eggs. Other Star Trek touchstones include Equinox, the two-part episode from Voyager in which Captain Ransom is using sentient creatures to power his warp drive. I'm not certain if the tardigrade is sentient, but the implication does certainly seem to be there, and it definitely is a possibility. It is clear that I think Burnham at some point will have to come to the creature's defense, possibly facing off against Lorca in order to do so. I've seen some complaints online that a lot of people are complaining that Discovery is about this weird spore drive, and what kind of thing is that for a show to be about? But that's really not what Star Trek Discovery is about. What the show is about is the characters and redemption and Starfleet and Federation ethics in the face of war, and how we get from where we are in this series to the utopia of the Federation. How can we hold on to our ideals in the face of destruction and hardship? When we're faced with moral dilemmas such as how we're treating this creature, how do we get from there to the future where we don't do those kinds of things anymore? I really think that Star Trek Discovery is going to be doing the deep moral, ethical Star Trek situations. We certainly see the groundwork being laid for that in this episode. Again, like I said, I didn't quite like this one as much as the previous episode, and part of that I think has to do with Commander Landry's stupidity here. This is quite possibly the most ridiculous death I've seen, and it's really too bad. I was starting to really get interested in her character, and I thought that we'd get to know her a little bit better. Instead, in the previous episode, she saw what this creature could do, and she saw that it was not affected by phasers. She grabs a bigger, more powerful phaser here, but still the effect is the same. She didn't wait to check to see if it was sedated before opening this shield and allowing it to kill her. Now, we see before that she is very much affected by not wanting to let Captain Lorca down, and also by the unique way Lorca has of motivating his people with the kind of guilting them with the transmissions from Corvan II, and they clearly really do affect her. However, in the moment, she really just makes a fateful error and definitely turns out to not be one of Starfleet's finest, to put it mildly. All in all, I'd have to give this episode probably a 3 out of 5 Spore canisters here. It was not at the same level as the last episode, unfortunately, but there are a lot of seeds being sown, a lot of groundwork being laid for future episodes, and I can't wait to see a lot of this pay off. Well, thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. Links are all in the description below. Join me next week when I review the next episode of Star Trek Discovery, Choose Your Pain. Until then, live long and prosper.